Welcome, and thanks for joining us at the Grown-Ups Table. I'm Dave Patterson.
And I'm Dylan DeQuano. This is the podcast where we talk to you about the shit you never learned, but you probably should have. What's going on, Dave?
Not too much. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, just trucking along here. We just had the first weekend of fantasy football, which I lost.
Oh, I think you were the only guy in the league who got fewer points than I did, so thanks for that, man.
Yeah.
I needed that. My whole team combined for a grand total of 0 touchdowns, which is really special.
Wow.
Quite an accomplishment. I'm very proud.
I was not very thrilled. I had one guy who got 0 points and did play in a game that was, I think, like 35-27. He was a running back. He got 0 points. He didn't even
must
get
not have had
targeted.
A single touch.
Yeah, no, he didn't touch
Why'd
the
you
ball.
draft this guy? Who is this? Who are you talking about?
Let me pull it up. Oh, crap. I pulled up the wrong one. Brandon Ayuk. Wide receiver on the 49ers.
Yeah.
95% rostered in the league.
He's a good player.
He's a good player. He didn't even get the ball thrown to him one time the whole game. So he got me a grand total of 0. Also, I'm new to football, listeners. So, I mean, if we're going to jump to the question, what have you been working on lately? What I've been working on is trying to figure out how the hell fantasy football works, because everything that looked like it was supposed to happen did not.
That's essentially how it works. You figured it out.
All right.
Congrats, man. You've done it.
I'm a pro.
You can take the rest of the week off.
All right. Yeah. I just won't even set my lines, because what's the point?
Yeah, let's keep that attitude up until we're matched up.
Yeah. Yeah, how about you? What's new with you outside of fantasy football?
Outside of being slightly less irate about fantasy football than you, tried making my own hot sauce.
Oh,
Grew some habaneros in my garden all summer.
Nice.
Finally had enough of them ready to be picked. Tried making some hot sauce. Turned out pretty good. Had some today. I'm happy with it. Learned some lessons. Wear gloves.
Yeah. Don't touch your pee-pee.
Don't touch your pee-pee. You will watch half of Monday Night Football with an ice pack in your pants. I've heard. Friend of a friend of mine. And open every damn window in your house.
That's a good call.
Because even when I put the gloves on, I'm just standing there like my lungs are on fire. There's just this, I forget what it's called, but there's something that's released when you cook up peppers like that. That is just nasty in the air. So open some windows, get some ventilation, wear gloves.
What'd you put in your sauce?
Yeah, but so it's just habaneros, olive oil, vinegar, salt, little brown sugar, and then I put in some pineapple and blueberries as well, just to give it a little more zest. Yeah. So pretty happy with how it turned out for a first attempt at homemade, homegrown hot sauce. But yeah, that's kind of my fun project.
If you give it a 0 to 10 on the heat scale, where would you?
Oh, we're at about an 8.
An 8? Pretty hot?
Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Yeah.
Pretty hot. Yeah, I've been using very small amounts of it. It's potent.
Nice.
I don't know what a 10 would be. Like 10.
Well,
like,
okay.
To me, 10 is like I'm crying and running to get a thing of milk.
I think we may have talked about this show on an episode, Hot Ones.
Hot Ones, yeah.
Yeah, Hot Ones. And they have this sauce near the end because the wings just get hotter and hotter. It's called Da Bomb. And when I was at Max's place, Max, the league commish, we were watching football on Sunday. We smoked some wings on the smoker for an hour. That's all it took, really. We put the heat pretty high. And then we did our own little mini hot ones of just 5 sauces after we just ate way too much. Literally all we did was eat on Sunday. But we had room for 5 more wings right before I left. And Max has that Da Bomb hot sauce from Hot Ones. So we finished with it, and it was very hot. But honestly, I must have like good tolerance. And I thought that I was becoming more of a wimp because I used to really like hot sauce. Now I'm not as into it as I used to be. But I handled myself pretty well. And that's the one everyone always dies on the show. So maybe Sean Evans hit me up. I'll come on. Or we'll have him on. How about that?
There we go. I was gonna say
Yeah.
he would help our show more than we would help his.
That's debatable, Dave.
I don't know if it is though.
No, it's not. He's
Yeah.
very famous now. Has really cool people on his YouTube show. So check it out, fans. If you like this show, you'll definitely like Hot Ones. Well, I'm glad your hot sauce turned out good.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the air clears from the house within the next day or two.
Yeah.
And we'll be back to normal.
Yeah.
So what's on tap for today?
On tap for today, we have Dustin Forrester. He is a real estate agent with the Agent Gordon Group with Royal LePage. And he is, I mentioned this at the end of our last episode. He was my realtor. He helped me buy and sell my house. And awesome guy. And I learned a lot from him through that process. Like the first time we bought our house, we used my dad's friend who is a realtor as well. I'll give him a shout out, Johnny Rivers. Great guy.
That's a great name.
Yeah. Johnny Rivers. Uncle Jibby.
That's a great
is what
name.
I called him growing up.
Uncle Jimmy?
Jibby.
Jibby.
Yeah, there's a story behind that. But anyways, he helped us buy our first house in Georgetown, which was a totally different experience because the market was different and also our cash flow was a little different at the time. Yeah. And we just kind of found a house that was really cheap and needed a lot of work and made it happen with him. This time with Dustin, we spent a lot more time really looking for something we wanted. Looked in a bunch of different areas, checked like a lot more looking at like market values of things. And also, as people know in the GTA and surrounding areas, the real estate market's been crazy the past year and a half. So
we bought a little more widespread than that.
Yeah, probably everywhere. But yeah, for us, we kind of got into there right before it got really crazy. So he helped us through the whole process. And we're going to ask him a bunch of questions today about first-time home buyers, just like what you got to do to be a real estate agent, like all the other stuff that comes with that. He also wanted to kind of get into some other personal stuff about careers, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Sounds good. Well, I think he's in the green room now, so we can bring him on in.
Alrighty. Hey listeners, just wanted to let you know that when we originally recorded this conversation with Dustin, we had some technical difficulties and we ended up losing a bunch of our files. So it might sound like we're just jumping randomly into this conversation, and we also might refer at some point back to something we said at the beginning that never actually was said. So sorry about that, but hope you still enjoy it. And here we go. Alrighty, so I know that you had a kind of different career path before you started getting into real estate. Do you want to just give us a background to that, how you got into it, or like, I don't know what like got you to decide that this was the path you wanted to go down?
Yeah, great question. In 2011, I started a career as a police officer in Waterloo, and was really pumped about that job for quite a while, but gradually over the years, I was starting to not feel fulfilled. I started dabbling in real estate investing, and I bought a couple of rental properties.
Right.
Which really, that just was the start of the journey. I was always looking at side businesses to start or something like that, and eventually just honed in on getting my real estate license. I got licensed in March of 2019, and I was super lucky in that the police service allows you to do what's called a job share. So for two officers work the schedule of one full-time officer. So basically 20 hours a week that I was able to work. So that was a really cool way to kind of get my feet wet in it. And I just had a great start to my career. I got 3 deals done in my first month, which was just beyond my wildest expectations. And then it's been super busy basically ever since then. So a year later, I was able to wrap it up with the police service, and get into it full time, and it's been great.
So when did you actually start full-time real estate?
I quit policing July 1st of last year.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that's cool.
Did you know that you knew I was a cop before, right?
Yeah, you told us some like police stories and stuff like that, but I didn't know that you were like kind of still doing it at the same time, and that there had been that much of a crossover still. But that's interesting, and it just is like a super different career path from going into like police to real estate. Like one is like a job where it's, I don't know, some people might call it like a cushy job. I mean, obviously police do a lot of different like tasks and work and stuff like that, but like a job that's got like benefits and a pension and like those kinds of
guaranteed paycheck
things that
yes.
Yeah, that real estate doesn't have. So I don't know if you want to go into that at all.
Yeah, that was a huge leap for me. Before I was a cop, I worked for the city of Mississauga, also pension benefits. So I've been with Omers. I had 11 years service with them. My parents had pensions and benefits and things like that. So that's kind of how I was brought up, believing that having a pension was the be all end all. And it is a great thing to have, obviously. But it took me a long time to juggle to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. But what I landed on was that the pension, as great as they are, was not worth not figuring out what my potential was in what I wanted to do. So for those guys that loved policing and didn't want to do anything else, then yeah, what a great thing to have. But once that's not for you, it seems like a tough decision, but in hindsight, there's not even a decision to make. It's a no-brainer at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean that's super interesting that you just like went through that career shift, obviously, and like sounds like just based on the real estate market and my experience with you that business is good.
Yeah, man, it's going really well. It's going better than I could have hoped for, really. And that's a huge life lesson I've learned. I spent so much time worrying about, not so much worrying, but planning for worst case scenario. And while obviously you need to do some of that when you're going to make a change like that, I haven't had to dip into any of those sort of reserves of, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? It's been a pretty straight and steady course. And the lesson there is to bet on yourself and know that you're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that exact thing, like bet on yourself and know that I feel like this is a kind of career where you reap whatever you put into it, right? If you give it your all and you are dedicated to the job, then the business is going to come to you. And like, I mean, even I know like I've referred a friend to you who had a successful sale with you, and like, if you do good business like you do, then you're going to keep getting more and more business and you're going to get your name out there. So
yeah, it's been a pretty cool, like the last year or 2 years has just been kind of my life turned upside down, but in the best possible way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into it, and it might be different because like I said off the top, we had planned to record this last week, but we always ask our guests this every week. What are we drinking tonight?
You know what? And I thought of that about 5 minutes before we started.
Yeah.
I had everything ready for the Moscow Mule on Friday. I swear. I had one on Friday.
Yeah.
Delicious. Tonight I'm having a cherry bubbly.
Oh, nice. Well, Dave is also on the non-alcoholic beverage tonight. I know that.
Keeping it simple.
Coffee at 8:30 p.m. Dave.
Yeah, well, if you've consumed enough caffeine in your life, it stops doing much.
That's hardcore.
Well, I did go down the road of the mule tonight. Got my ginger beer, my tequila, a little bit of lime juice, some sugar. I went not as hardcore as I did last time with all the I just used the pre-made lime juice this time, but still pretty tasty. I don't even know if it was worth doing all the extra work of cutting up a lime and juicing it last time. This worked fine.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
All right.
All right. Do you want to get into it, Dave?
Yeah. So obviously you're a realtor. Dylan and I have each bought a house before, so we've worked with realtors. What are some things if I feel like realtors are one of those things, often people have a family friend or somebody they went to university with, or they know somebody who does it who they can call. But if you're not in that situation, what are some things you should look for when searching for a realtor?
Great question. I think depends a lot on the different circumstances, but there's a few things that are never going to change. And the number one thing that comes to mind when you ask that is trust. It's meeting someone, and
I can't tell if you're cutting out or if you're leaving space.
I'm cutting out.
Okay, crap. Our recording crapped out again here. Sorry, listeners. Won't happen again. Thank you. Well, as a real estate agent, is it ever better for someone who's looking in the housing market to just be like, I don't need to buy right now, I need to rent, but I should use a realtor to find a rental property versus just like Kijiji or whatever classifieds you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of real estate agents will do both. I certainly have helped a number of people with rental properties. Usually what I'll recommend, depending on kind of if someone's coming from out of town, then obviously I'll be more involved. But if it's just a friend looking for a spot, I'll kind of play a hybrid role where I'll say, you take Kijiji. If you find anything there and have any questions, let me dive into it and figure it out. I'll look on the MLS and see what's on there and take you through anything that requires a real estate agent.
Right, because probably a lot of people don't even list their rental properties through a real estate agent too. It's just on.
Yeah, and I'll do the same thing if I sell a client a rental property and they want to rent it out. Obviously we can put it on MLS, but often they'll just find somebody on Kijiji just as fast anyways.
Okay.
That makes sense.
If you are looking to make that step from rental to buying, like, there are different benefits for that first-time home buyer in Canada, right? So what are some of those differences? Or maybe there's differences in Ontario versus other provinces.
Yeah, so a very significant one is the first-time home buyer's tax credit. Every time you trade real estate, there is a land transfer tax in Ontario, which is double if you are in Toronto. They have a municipal land transfer tax and the provincial land transfer tax. So you get a credit up to a certain amount. I'm not sure exactly what it is, something around $4,000, I believe, towards that land transfer tax. There are other programs as well where the government will assist you to increase your buying power. There's a program I haven't been involved with. I have no experience with it yet, but my understanding is basically the government will buy 10% of your property with you, reducing your carrying costs. But then when you sell it, they get 10% back. I haven't seen that actually in effect, but I think it's a legit thing.
Okay.
And then another huge one is the ability to borrow out of your RRSPs. So if you have saved money over the years, you've gotten tax money back by contributing to your RRSPs. Under normal circumstances, if you're going to take money out of that RRSP, you have to claim that as income tax. But if it's for the purposes of buying your first home, you don't need to, up to a certain amount. I think it's $25,000 or $30,000.
Yeah, that's something I took advantage of when I purchased my house.
Yeah, great thing to do. I learned the hard way that you need to pay that back in installments every single year.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I know it now.
And that's only for first-time home buyers. You can't do that if you've already bought a house before.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And then on that note, you just mentioned that you had a big shock about paying back that RRSP in installments. What other kind of things might shock a first-time home buyer if they've never gone through it before? Just like, when you go to sign the paperwork, like, hey, I bought a house, but then there's all these other things you have to do. I don't know if you want to get into some of that.
Yeah, land transfer tax is a big one. The credit is enough to soften the blow a little bit, but depending, someone's buying $1 million property, which is not uncommon these days as someone's first time, maybe not 1 million, but 700,000-800,000 is pretty common now. That can carry a lot of tax implications with it. Mm-hmm. First time buyers, as this is a show that's designed to start from the ground up, right? So I'll just cover this off that buyers don't pay realtors 99% of the time. There are certain circumstances that you would get into, but we don't even need to go in that because I've never had a buyer pay me. It's always the listing agent, the listing, that the person selling their house that's going to pay the realtor. So you don't need to worry about that sticker shock. It's a lot easier to digest if you just made a couple $100,000 on your house than if you're putting your life savings into something.
Yeah, I will say that there was a little bit of sticker shock for me when we were doing the selling of our house. I was like, oh man, okay. I mean, I knew that you had to pay.
But it hurts more when you see it, right?
Yeah, because we didn't experience that when we bought our first house, and buying the second house, made money off first house. And then, so you're right. It does soften the blow a little bit. It's kind of just the business of selling your house.
Yeah, it is. So for buyers, the other thing, you got legal fees, which are usually pretty reasonable. You're $1,500 for that. From a buying perspective, there's not a ton. You want to make sure you get insurance taken care of. You want to know if there's condo fees, all of that stuff that should be spelled out pretty clearly in advance by your real estate agent. But I don't think a ton of huge sticker shock things from the buying side. Again, it's more selling, along with commission when you sell. Also, the HST, I've seen that catch people off guard that you have to pay. You don't pay HST on your house when you sell it. It's exempt as of right now if it's a primary residence, but you do pay HST on the fees that you pay realtors.
Right. And now let's say this isn't your first time. I know this is kind of designed more this conversation for probably first time home buyers, but like you said, you've got a couple investment properties. And so I know Dave's dad has done similar stuff like that out in Peterborough. Are there differences when you own properties that are not to be used for your primary residence in terms of tax implications?
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah, big time.
A whole different ball game.
So basically, I shouldn't even have to give this caveat, but I just will. Obviously, I'm not an accountant, and I'm not going to get this perfect, but I'll give you my rough understanding of it. Is basically that anytime you sell anything for a profit in Canada, you have to pay income tax on it, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. Houses are no different, except for that there is an exemption for a primary residence. So if it's not a primary residence, let's say you just bought a condo, you rented it out for a few years, and now you sell it, you're going to have to pay what's called a capital gains tax on that. And capital gains tax is not as bad as what people tend to think, because you're only paying taxes on half of your profit.
Okay.
Sometimes people hear that 50% and they think it means that you're paying 50% of your profit. But it's actually not the case. It means that if you made $100,000 profit, 50,000 of that is still tax-free, and it's the next 50,000 that you're paying capital gains on.
Right.
Now that can change depending on the frequency of transactions you're doing. If you're flipping houses and the CRA thinks that it's
like a commercial endeavor or something,
if it's your income, now you pay income tax on it, and you're paying on the full pop.
Right. So those are some things that if anyone out there is trying to get into the real estate market for those kinds of reasons and flipping houses, you're a contractor or something like that, just be aware of that kind of stuff. Because I'm sure a lot of people do that and probably kind of sneak under the rug of the government a little bit for a little while, but then once they catch on, they were going to get their taxes from you, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to be caught publicly posting endorsements of that.
I'm not endorsing that. I'm saying that I'm sure that it happens, that people sneak under the rug for a little while when they first start doing it. And then they've done it a couple times and the CRA is like, nope, not anymore. You're going to pay that full amount.
Most people our age I talk to now are just like stressed about if they'll ever be able to afford one home. So I don't know how many of them are wheeling and dealing, but hey, maybe.
I know that wasn't really a topic we plan on covering here, but I have a suggestion for those people.
What's that?
No one ever likes the suggestion.
What's the suggestion?
Look at if they can get a rental, like if they can live in a rental property where they want to be and they just can't afford to buy a house there, then I would advise those people to look at markets outside of the GTA where you can afford a house and buy it as a rental. You're taking on a little more risk because now you have a mortgage, property taxes over here, and you have to make your rent payment. So I understand there's a bigger risk there. But let's say you look at a smaller community like Chatham, Kent, for example. You could pick up a cheapo little condo there for like 300 grand, probably get a decent house for like 400 or 500 grand, rent it out, probably cash flow a little bit, depending on how much you put as down payment. And at least that way, those people are exposed to the market.
Yeah, you're building equity.
You're building equity. Whether you cash flow or not, who knows? But as long as that rent's coming in and your mortgage payment's getting paid, if the market increases just a little bit, it could be significant versus waiting for some dip that may or may not come. Obviously, it's not for everybody and it comes down to your values. But if someone's really wanting to get into the real estate market and simply cannot afford to do it where they live, that's one option.
Yeah, I've got some friends who I think it was their first house. They bought a duplex. They lived in one half of it, rented out the back half of it. The rental basically covered the mortgage. So you're basically living rent free / mortgage free almost somewhere, and you're in the market. So it's like kind of the perfect scenario for some people. Yeah. But you're not going to be able to do that everywhere. You got to... Yeah.
No, and I like what you're saying, Dustin, too, about doing that outside of the market you're in if you can't afford that market. And that raises another question. We talked about finding a realtor. I know I moved outside of the GTA where I could afford to buy. I've worked from home for 5 years, so I had that flexibility. Nice. But one of the challenges of doing something like that is you don't have connections. So as far as I need a realtor, I didn't know anybody in the area who had a realtor to connect me with. So how do people, if they're looking, say 2 or 1 hour even away from where they live, find a realtor?
Most real estate agents will do a decent amount of networking as part of their overall business plan. So a good place to start is just talking to a realtor that you do know in your market and saying, hey, do you have somebody in this city that you know, that you trust? And you never know. Like for me, I've got friends in 10 different cities in this province that are real estate agents that I know are going to do a really great job. So at least you're going in with, again, some sense of familiarity, some sense of trust. This person's been vetted to a certain extent. And that happens pretty frequently. And I think it's a really great way to try. Maybe they don't know anybody, and then there's Google searches, there's rankmyagent.com. You can go on there and see who's getting good reviews, how many reviews. Read some. One time I've had somebody that just read my bio on royallepage.ca and liked what they read, and they ended up being really great clients of mine. We had a great time, got them an awesome house, and they were coming from the city and moving out this way. And so that worked out well for them.
Must be a good bio.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty good.
Well, Dave, you had that experience yourself. How did that work for you?
Did you find I did exactly what Dustin suggested. I knew a realtor closer in my way who I spoke with and, he, through various networking things and organizations, knew somebody out this way, and it worked out great.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's exactly what I did, and it certainly worked out just fine for me. But hopefully, other people.
And that's how we met too, right?
Yeah, yep, same. I was going to say the exact same. I had a friend who's based in Toronto. Now she's up in Barrie. But we just talked to her and we're like, we're looking to move to Guelph. And she's like, I don't know Guelph that well, but I got this friend who does, so you should reach out to him. And then we just gave Dusty Boy a call and he hooked us up. So we didn't end up moving to Guelph, but it all worked out in the end. And like you said right off the top, you know, it's building that trust right off the bat, finding someone who you gel with and you feel like you connect with, and it works out.
Yeah, like do everyone a favor and take the time to make sure that you're going to have that connection and work with someone that it's going to be fun. Because we spent quite like a reasonable amount of time looking at houses and grabbing lunch, and not a ton of lunches, but they were in there. And yeah, it just makes it a fun job. Makes it a fun experience.
There was downtime. It would be like, okay, we've got like 4 back-to-back appointments, but we got a half hour to kill here, so we're just going to have to chill. And why wouldn't you want to chill with someone who you like to hang out with rather than just like, I don't know, your dad's friend? No offense to my dad's friend who was my real estate agent the first time. I liked him, but like I said off the bat as well, it was just a different experience this time for me. So we got our first ever on this podcast listener question, which I'm going to ask. So this is from @BreeTurner25 on Instagram.
What's up, Bree?
And she's asking, is it a smart investment to buy pre-builds, both condos and houses, or is it just a better theory than practice?
That's a really good question. First thing that comes to mind, because we were just talking about it, are the tax implications. You need to speak with an accountant, like have to speak to an accountant, because every builder does it a different way. Often the HST can be applicable to a brand new home. Often the builders will cover it, but there are some, I don't want to get too much into it because I'm not a pro on it, but I just bought a pre-construction property and here's what we're faced with. There is a tax credit of somewhere between $24,000 and $30,000 that does not apply if it's used as an investment property. If it's used for anything other than a primary residence. So I can use it as an investment and rent it out. And at the end of the year, if I have a 1-year lease, I can get a tax credit.
Like in terms of buying a pre-build, like is it a different process?
Yeah.
Than buying like a house that's just on the market. It's been around since the 60s.
It is a different process. A lot of people don't know that you can still reach out to your friendly neighborhood realtor. That's a place where a lot of buyers will just go straight to that builder, which isn't crazy, but I've helped people buy pre-construction properties, and there is a little bit of negotiating to be done sometimes, and it's nice to have somebody in your corner. Whether it's a good investment or not, obviously, is going to depend on a lot of stuff that's kind of out of our control. But historically, most people I know that bought pre-construction, by the time that house was built, they made a significant amount of money on it, built a significant amount of equity. That can be for a number of reasons. Firstly, the most obvious thing is that the market has just kept going up and up and up. So if you paid for something in January of 2020 and took possession of it January 2021, you made a ton of coin. That thing went up 20% or whatever it was. There also can sometimes be opportunities when you're buying pre-construction where they're already a little under market value. They're trying to raise funds on that phase one. They need to get deals done. You don't see a ton of that anymore. I think often when you're hearing of people having good experiences with pre-construction, it's just because the market has performed so well. But definitely a good avenue to look down. Another advantage of it is that sometimes you're not competing with other buyers, where in that same market there would be multiple offers on the resale version of that house. And if there is more buyers than there is units, then they'll go to a lottery system sometimes. So it's not about, you're not driving that price up, offering $100,000 over asking. You're putting your name in the hat, and if you get selected, then you get to buy a unit.
Cool. Yeah, and I guess like I know a friend who bought a pre-build, and I guess for them too, it's like you don't have to pay as much money. Like you can kind of spread out when you're making that down payment until it's built, right? Like if it's going to take 5 years to build, then you basically are just like spreading out how much money you need to pay, from what I understand anyway. Like you're going to pay the same amount, but it just doesn't hurt so much right off the bat.
Different builders will have different schedules for that, but you're right. Often it is 5% now, 5% in 2 months, 5% in 6 months, and then 5% on closing, or however they break it up. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll even have it so it's less than 20% total. It'll just be a 10% down payment. That kind of depends, and there can be different implications with your mortgage. But yeah, overall, you're spreading out that down payment, so it's a much easier pill to swallow to cut a couple $15,000 checks than one big 100,000 or whatever it's going to be.
I was going to say that actually raises another good point when you talk about that 20% mortgage, because obviously not everybody puts down 20%, but there are benefits to that. So can you kind of get into that a little bit, what the differences are in a 5% down payment versus a 20%, and how that ends up looking for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to share my own 2 cents here as we talk about it, because this may be a bit of a controversial opinion on this, but a lot of people would say 20% down is the way to go. And if you can afford to do that, then sure, you're saving a ton of. If you do 5% down, it is called it's a higher risk mortgage. Right. You need anytime you're doing less than 20% down, you need to get mortgage insurance, usually through CMHC. And that mortgage insurance gets built into your mortgage, and it can be pretty significant depending on the size of the mortgage and how much you're putting down. I want to say when I bought my first house, I think I put $17,000 down. And when I got my bank statement, I had like $5,000 had gone towards the actual mortgage, and the rest had all gone to CMHC insurance or something to that effect.
Wow.
So if you can avoid that and do the 20% down, awesome. Here's where it gets a little stickier, is if you can't afford to do that now and you're trying to save up to get that 20%, you really need to do the math on how long is it going to take me to save an extra $100,000 cashola versus how much equity am I going to miss out in growth as the market increases, although there's no guarantee of that. But what there is a guarantee of is you're paying rent somewhere, probably. And how much is that costing you versus just biting the bullet? It's the cost of doing business. Get into the market with that 5% down. It's going to really depend on people's scenarios. But I have seen people get really hung up in like, you can't buy a house with 5% down because of the fees. And I think often they miss out.
Right. So, I mean, and like you said, that is one opinion on it too. We're just going to say off the bat here, every situation is different and you need to figure out what's best for you, because that might be the perfect solution for you. But sure, for other people, you might need to put down that more money. So, figure out what's going to work for you.
I always have the benefit of using hindsight. So obviously I could say, yeah, you should have bought a house 5 years ago and not waited because the market's gone up. But very important for people to know, real estate is a market, just like a gas price or whatever. It can go down. I've had a lot of people say to me casually, and I'm sure if you really push them on it, they'd agree, but you can't lose with real estate. It always goes up, which is just not true. It's a great investment. I believe in it. I'm heavily invested in real estate, but I'm keenly aware that if it can go up 10% in 1 month, it can certainly go down 10% in 1 month as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Everyone's been, I feel like my whole life, all I've ever heard is, when is that real estate market bubble gonna burst? And
yeah, I've been hearing about that bubble since before
it hasn't burst yet, but like, like how big can it get? I don't know.
And I know one of the things in Ontario specifically right now is just a shortage of housing.
Huge shortage of housing. Yeah.
Huge. And that's a big part of the problem in many areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're seeing some movement there, but yeah, that's a pretty big driving force behind the market right now. That's not likely going to change overnight.
No, I suspect it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I think of real estate, I think one of the most fundamental changes to the industry has got to be MLS.
Absolutely.
And the fact that 20 years ago, if you were buying a place, you didn't know what was listed until your realtor said, hey, let's look at these places. Whereas right now, you're emailing the realtor saying, hey, let's look at these places. And it's kind of, people are doing their own window shopping a lot more than you ever could.
Mm-hmm.
So how has that impacted your line of work?
So in my tenure, not a ton.
Right. I guess for you, yeah.
But as I look back, I would equate it with, I mean, there's a ton of really good analogies here, but basically my ability to perform is enhanced 100-fold because of the time savings. Like being able to send electronic documents probably saves 30% of my time compared to a realtor 20 years ago that didn't have that available to them. Not having to take you to see, to meet up with you, to show you the listings in my big book and saying like, this house just hit the market today. This house hit the market. It's a completely different career. My dad was a real estate agent when I was a kid for a little bit. And I don't even think it's not like you could say, teaching's changed or whatever. It's a completely different career now.
Mm-hmm.
Technology has equipped realtors to do a ton more business. And I think, depending on your perspective, to do it more effectively.
Yeah. And I would say, even from our experience, or my experience and Emily's experience, we've looked at houses on realtor.ca when we've not even been looking for houses, just because it's like, ooh, look at this one. That's a cool house. Oh, look at these houses around here. You put that limit to the $2.5 million houses. You're like, whoa, look at that house. Like it's kind of like a hobby for some people, just to like keep, and it helps people keep tabs on the market.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too, because before you'd have no idea what things in your neighborhood were going for. And now, I walked the dog this morning. I saw a new for sale sign on a yard. Half an hour later, I'm looking at pictures of the inside and the listing price on my phone.
Yeah.
And you didn't have that ability before. So you kind of have access to just so much information.
Yeah, I had a friend come over to our house for the first time a couple weeks ago, and then we were just showing her around the house and everything. And the next day she texts me. She's like, did you know your house was flipped before you bought it? Did you see I saw pictures online of what it looked like before. I'm like, that's weird that's just so readily available to anyone that they can just look that up. But it's kind of cool at the same time that you know what you're getting into.
So it's interesting that you say that. I consider myself, I'm a big picture thinker. And so sometimes if I'm just going to go show somebody a house for the first time, I haven't looked up every little single piece of information about that house leading up to it. Because sometimes you walk in the door, someone goes, I hate this house, and you leave. So it's just a waste of my energy to know everything about it. Mm-hmm. By all means, if we go in there and you love it, we're going to do a deep dive and know everything that we can know about it. But in my experience, I would say about half the buyers that I work with, when we go into a house, they're telling me stuff about it. because they have these tools available to them. And they're like, oh yeah, there used to be like 15 cars in the driveway in 2006 Google Street View, and the roof was clearly redone sometime between 2009 and 2011. And so pretty interesting in that way.
What are some things people don't look for when they're looking at listings online that they probably should?
One piece of information that's not always available, but that is a very important thing to know, is days on the market. There are some third-party websites that sometimes you can find list dates on, but on realtor.ca, I don't think you can see how long it's been on the market for. That's a very important number, because if something's been sitting on the market for 6 months in these market conditions, it tells me it's probably priced wrong. And on the flip side, I'll often get messages from people out of the blue going, oh my God, did you see this house? It's only $699, but it's been on the market for 3 days and it's probably going to sell for $850 or $900.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but that would be one very important piece of the puzzle. I mean, realtor.ca does a good job of giving a lot of the information to people. I would urge anybody to do a Google Street View, check out the neighborhood as best you can. If you're trying to arm yourself with all the info you can.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah, that's something good to point out too, is like, if you're looking at a house, don't just look at the house, look at what's up the road, look at what other houses in the area, like the maintenance maybe of your neighbor's properties, to know if it's somewhere you're going to like living. If there's I don't know, a Tim Hortons up the road and that's important to you, that's great. Maybe there's nothing around you for 15 kilometers. Like, that's another thing that you need to be aware of. Do you want to live in a super suburby area? Do you want to live right in the middle of like an urban town where there's a restaurant down the street from you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look into more than just the house itself. But
I did a lot of that when I was shopping, because especially, like I said, moving to a different area, I would go on Google Street View and just like move around the whole neighborhood trying to get a sense of what it looked like, because I was kind of going in blind.
Well, if you can get a sense of how well your neighbors are maintaining their property, one question people coming from out of this region always ask me about is, how good's the neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality, I feel keenly attuned to this, having been a police officer here for 9 years. So I do know where there's some pretty rough areas that you maybe don't want to buy a house, but you're almost always going to be able to tell if it's a good neighborhood just by being in it and seeing how people are taking care of their stuff. If they're small houses and all the lawns are mowed and all the garbages are put away and fresh siding on some of the houses, they're being well cared for, that's a great neighborhood in my books. And you can have other neighborhoods that are big 2,500 plus square foot houses, but no one's mowing the lawn. There's 5 cars in every driveway and scouring on the road, and there's toys out. And, not saying that everyone needs to be perfect, but certainly it's a bit of an indication as to who's maintaining what and how good care they're taking of it. And you also want to be aware of how many rentals you have relative to homeowners living in their homes.
Right. Yeah, because those can have big impacts just on the enjoyability of where you're going to live. You put all this time and money into finding a place and you think it's the perfect house, but you hate your neighbors, or you just like hate the street that you live on. Like, what's the point in all that? You probably could have found another similar house that would have done the job for you. So
yeah.
But getting into now let's say you found the right house, you found the perfect place, and you're ready to put in your offer. There's a lot of different things that are going to make your offer stronger than, like, that's what I experienced when I bought my first house. We were the only offer. It had been on the market for a really long time. We went under asking and we got it because that was just the situation with that house. This time around, it was not like that at all. It was like no conditions, basically, like no inspections. That's what every one of my friends who's bought a house in the past like year and a half has said, like, oh, we couldn't get an inspection done, or else like that we just wouldn't be able to get a house. Like, what are some things right now anyway that you need to do to make your offer strong?
This is really the meat and potatoes of this conversation, because this is the really important stuff that people need to be aware of. I'll start with home inspections, because you mentioned that. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of houses get purchased without any home inspection, or there is an alternative. What I've done with a number of buyers is called a pre-offer inspection, and you get a home inspector, you book a showing for an hour at the house, and get the home inspector to come through and take a look at. They're not going to be able to be as thorough as they are when they do a 2.5, 3 hour home inspection, but they're going to look at all the major health and safety components and structural, mechanical, and let you know if there's anything major coming down the road.
And then you don't have to actually include that as part of your offer, because it's just something you did right off the bat.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Right.
And it also, to me, that actually adds credibility to your offer, because it lets you know, maybe if it lets the seller know that they've got a buyer who's going in with eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be exactly what gets your offer accepted, but all things equal, I'm going to take the guys who have already done a home inspection over the guys who I'm just relying on common law, buyer beware. So the prevailing law is buyer beware. However, sellers do need to be disclosing material latent defects. So any big defects with the home that you can't readily see, sellers need to be disclosing that. But still, if someone's done that home inspection, it just takes an extra layer of that sort of out of the equation, and great tool. And it gives peace of mind to the buyers too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sorry.
And then I was just going to say, like, what about other things like putting down a deposit on the house? Like, does that have an impact on the buyer's, or sorry, on the seller's side? If they're like, okay, this person's put down or wanting to put down big money, does that make a difference versus like this offer that's higher sometimes?
This actually circles back to one of our earlier conversations here about sticker shock for buyers. You got to have a deposit ready. That is something that needs to be brought up very early on when chatting with buyers. Deposits are going to range in the Waterloo region. They're going to range from $10,000 to $50,000. In Toronto, you're seeing typical deposits being 5% of the total purchase price. So we're talking pretty big money, right? On $1 million property is $50,000. Obviously, in Toronto, you're going north of $1 million pretty frequently. Sellers will put in a listing. You won't see this as a buyer, but I'll see it as an agent. They'll put in their expectation of a deposit, and it could be $15,000. But if we're going to have the best offer, then my advice is to up that deposit for exactly the point you're saying. These people are here to do business. It gives that seller peace of mind that person's more serious about closing the transaction. So if you have an offer that has no conditions in it and you back out of that offer, there is significant civil liability on the buyer who has backed out of it, no matter what your deposit is. Mm-hmm. But if you have a much higher deposit, it gives that seller peace of mind that this person's going to stay at the bargaining table here and sort this out with us and not just disappear. If I leave a $500 deposit and disappear, then there's not a lot of skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Deposit's a free way to really boost the quality of your offer.
What about a letter? This is something I've heard some people say you should do. I know some people have had success with it, writing a letter to the people selling the house, explaining why you want it. Is that something you see often?
Yeah, I see it probably 5 to 10% of when I have a listing, about 5 to 10% of offers come through with a letter. I think it's an incredible tool. it's not, you'll never know as the buyer if it's the right circumstance for it or not. At the end of the day, money talks,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd be surprised how often offers are very, very close. And that letter can make all the difference. Or I've also had it with clients who have lived in a house for 30 years. They bought it for $100,000. They're selling it for $800,000. They maybe would take 780 instead of 800 because they've got this letter with new family and kids and a puppy, and they loved this about your home. And it's not likely to buy you $20,000 of goodwill, but it could.
I mean, it's a personal thing, selling and buying homes, right? People have very emotional connections, so you never know.
Yeah, people take a lot of pride in their homes and raise their families in their homes and have a ton of memories. And definitely if they know, especially if they know the other side is someone that wants to tear it down and redo this and redo that. And then they've got someone else that says, we wouldn't change a thing. We love everything about it. It's charming. And you want to be genuine and sincere about it, but definitely if you can get that message across, it's a free tool that stacks the odds in your favor.
Yeah, I've got a neighbor across the road who bought their house pre-build in 1962, watched it go up, came by every week and took a look at like the construction progress, said that there were no houses at the end of the street. You could just see farmland for miles. And he knows where every electrical wire runs in the house, knows everything about the plumbing, knows everything that's ever been done to the house in terms of that. And I'm sure someone like that would want to know that someone's going to come in and take the same love and care of that house that they did for more than 60 years. And yeah, maybe it will have some sort of credibility. Maybe they're just like, I don't really care. I'm not that sentimental, but you don't know until you send that letter, right?
Yep. That kind of reminds me of another thing that happens on showings is after you show a house, you always get a request from the listing agent for feedback. And this is maybe more advice to other realtors, but certainly as a buyer, you might want to be aware of what your realtor's saying. Some people will send feedback. The feedback's an important tool if there are things that we can do to change how the house is showing. And we had a bad experience because the cat was out and the cat wouldn't leave us alone. Like, that's great feedback. I want to know that. If you want to tell me how ugly the house is, I've been through the house, so I understand the condition of it, right? All you're going to do is sometimes people will submit an offer and their feedback was very negative.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of sellers remember that feedback. And they're like, is this the guy that said like the carpet was ugly? It's like, yeah, it is. And then you have the next people that their feedback was, we loved everything about the home. That can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So is that something where buyers representatives think that they're like negotiating earlier, trying to talk them down on it, but it just backfires?
Backfires.
Yeah.
Negotiating is so much more about what you don't say than what you do say.
Yeah, most of life is.
Yeah, I probably every listing, one of the offers I get comes from someone that said, "Nah, house is too small, out of date, doesn't really work for my clients." Blah blah. And their offer always sucks, but you'd hate for it to have been one that was super close, and they lose it because they left this useless feedback.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of just into this similar conversation about like people's maybe sentimental values about their homes and stuff like that. And like maybe being offended if someone says the wrong thing in that feedback. Like I've heard stories of people who've like walked up to someone's house, knocked on the door and just been like, hey, I love this house. I've looked at it every day for the past 5 years when I drive by, and I want to live in this house someday. I know you're not selling your house right now, but here's my name and phone number. If you're ever selling, please give me a call because I'd like love to buy that. Have you ever heard of that happening or working, or what's your thought on that? And maybe it's too anecdotal, but I don't know. Just something I figure this is the right place to ask someone.
No, that's a good question. I've heard of it. I'm just kind of running scenarios in my head. I know I've done it on behalf of clients where I've sent letters to certain streets saying, I've got client, like very, very serious. I've got a client that wants a house on this street, like, small streets and nice neighborhoods. Or farmers. I've got clients that would want to sever a lot off of your land. As far as, I'm sure people have done it, and I'm sure it probably works. And it's not a bad idea, I don't think.
The worst they say is no, I guess.
Yeah, worse they're like, okay, or they forget and they throw your name away. But
yeah, a lot of realtors pre-COVID had a lot of success knocking on doors and saying, do you want to sell your house? And I don't know what the numbers are, maybe 1 in 100 say, yeah, we are interested in selling.
Yeah, might as well shoot for it, right? You get all those things in the mail too, where it looks like a handwritten note, and it's like, we buy houses for cash as is, over market value. Give us a call, we'll buy it right away, no questions asked. And like, are those legit? Are they scams? Like,
they're not scams.
And how do they get in my mailbox? That's
someone's handing them out. Either they're sending them through post office or just some hand delivering them. There are people that will buy your house in as is condition. They're not going to pay you full market value for it. They're going to have a significant amount of margin built into that. And look, for some people, it's worth it. They don't want to go on the market. They don't want to deal with a real estate agent. They don't want this, that. I've been in houses that you would not want to ever step foot in, and you'd be embarrassed to put it on the market.
Yeah,
I'm talking some pretty rough stuff. Those people are going to sell their house. I would say 9 times out of 10, if they'd put it on the open market, they're going to do probably notably better. But do those people serve a purpose, and it obviously works for them, or they wouldn't be doing it?
Yeah, they want to keep it up.
Yeah.
And on that, you had mentioned before that you or other real estate agents have like done door knocking and stuff like that, or sent out letters on behalf of clients. Like, what other services do real estate agents offer, maybe that like don't typically come to mind, whether it's just buying or selling houses or condos? Are there other things that someone could use a realtor for?
Yeah. So, those are great examples where someone has told me, we want to live in this area, we need land there, or whatever it may be. And I'm doing the back end research, getting everyone's information and firing off a letter to all of those homeowners saying, I've got someone that wants to buy your house. That can be a great tool. It's not always super effective, but again, shoot your shot. You never know. Door knocking, same idea. I don't do door knocking now with COVID. I just think the optics are not great.
Yeah.
I don't want to be offending or scaring anybody. I don't know what the rules are on it right now. It's probably not even allowed. I don't do it now, but I did do it a little bit before. Again, if someone said that they really wanted to be in a certain area, I could door knock on their behalf. Or on the flip side, sometimes I would door knock to try and generate business. It wasn't something that I loved doing. I don't mind it totally, but I didn't love it. And I think if you're doing something that you don't love, you're just not going to excel at it.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly know there are realtors that door knocking is their bread and butter, and they just really enjoy it. So I think people pick up on that. If you're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I don't spend a ton of time with it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, we are getting pretty close to kind of the hour mark.
Say,
so I don't know.
A lot here.
Yeah, we have. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you're like, we need to talk about this? Like, this is something that anyone who's looking to buy a house for the first time needs to know.
I feel like we did a really good job of covering this stuff off. I would say to anybody interested in getting into the market that a realtor should be happy to sit down with you, grab a coffee, or do a Zoom call or whatever it's going to be. And they should have a lot of information to give. Obviously, depending on how much information you want, not every buyer cares how it's done. They just want to get a house and it's done. But my philosophy is to educate my clients so that when we do get into that battle zone, they know why we're doing pre-offer inspections instead of conditional on an offer, and why I'm saying, hey, you should get a check for $50,000 instead of $10,000 for a deposit. And all of those things, to me, they've become second nature because I do it every single day. But sometimes it's really good to just sit down and chat about those things and really understand, okay, what happens to my deposit if we don't get accepted? How long is it going to take for those funds to go back in my account? Any number of things. I usually have about an hour conversation with a buyer. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's, hey, let's go look at this house, and off we go. But in a perfect world, I'm going to from now on just recommend they listen to this podcast because it covers it. But there's a ton of information, and really there's a lot more to it than just, I like this house, here's what I'm going to offer, let's see what happens. And having a good conversation about that so they understand it is only going to make sure that they do a better job of getting that house.
Awesome. And I mean, you kind of just right there, I think, answered this one question that I wanted to ask, which might be an elephant in the room for some people when you're talking about the fees and stuff that go to a realtor. But I think you just kind of answered there why you might want to use a realtor rather than just selling your home privately on Purple Bricks or on whatever these kinds of different things is, because that knowledge that realtor brings and how they're going to best serve you and get you the best deal. Like, yeah, maybe you'll have to pay them more money in fees. And we had this conversation with Jason on our 2 episodes ago. Sometimes fees are not worth like griping over because the amount that you're going to get like on top of that outweighs the fees by so much. And if you're doing it with the right person who has the right strategy, they're going to make you a lot more money.
Yeah. I think I wouldn't be in this business anymore if I didn't feel that I added that value to a transaction. I think if I sold a few houses and kept going like, man, I cannot believe they're giving me all this money to just post this on realtor.ca. Yeah. I don't see how that's a sustainable business. On the surface, it kind of looks like that, but really it's, I think what people need to understand about that is that it's a knowledge economy, not a labor economy. So per hour, you're paying your real estate a good amount of money for sure. But if you can get past that, it's that realtor is bringing hopefully a ton of value to a massive transaction, getting a small little sliver of it and hopefully adding more value than they're taking. Mm-hmm. Not always going to be the case. There are tough sales, but I'm very confident when I look back on a lot of the sales that I've had that I could see where had someone not done things the way I did them, they could have easily left $10,000 or $20,000 on the table, or made a decision that cost them money through liability or not. So many different circumstances that I feel that I bring value to the table.
Yeah. And I mean, like when we came and worked with you and you told us your strategy for selling your house, you're like, we're going to list it here because this is going to get people looking and this is going to get people in the door and this is going to get you offers and we're going to hold offers and we're going to do all these different, there are things I had never even thought about, heard about, didn't know about. If I was just trying to list that home on my own, I don't know the value of my house. Maybe I have an idea of where I think it kind of sits, but maybe I'm totally off. But maybe that's not even the important thing about when you list your house. It's not about the price that's on there. It's what someone's going to pay for it.
Yeah. However, if you list it at the wrong price too high, then it may really hurt that sale. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, no one's looking at it. It's been on the market for 3 or 4 weeks. And people are going, well, what's wrong with that house that it hasn't sold? And they just, if you ever put a note in your phone of something, a reminder that you want to do, if you don't do it in the first 5 times you see that reminder, then it
just sits
disappears. You don't even see it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that
Well,
for stretching or do yoga, and I know it's in my phone, but I never see it anymore. Actually, I've got a good anecdote on that where I had spoken with a lady who was interested in selling her duplex. She had it listed on Kijiji. I went and chatted with her about possibly listing it. And I did have a buyer that was looking for a duplex. And after I saw it, I reported back to my buyer on what I saw. Time went by and I reached out to that seller again and expressed the interest on behalf of my buyer. And her response to me was, we have someone that's interested, so I'll let you know how that goes next week. And in a slow market, you got a good buyer on the go, fine, go for it. But in this market, to not even let competition happen is just doing such a disservice to your property and to your sale. Obviously, it's your house. Someone can do with it as they please. But if they don't think that there's a ton of money being left on the table there, then they're not quite understanding everything that goes into selling a house in today's market.
and that's all the value that's brought when selling a place. But, we're also talking to a lot of people who probably haven't bought a place yet. And so, for a first time home buyer, you're not even paying the realtor.
Yeah, it's free.
Nothing's coming out of your wallet here. So as far as getting that expertise and having somebody to kind of hold your hand through that complicated process, the value is obvious because you're not paying anything. So anything that's free is pretty good value to begin with, let alone everything they're doing to help you from start to finish in searching for a house.
And you start to develop that relationship nice and early. And then, like, honestly, I know right now, if I'm looking to sell this house ever, I'm calling my boy Dusty.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll touch on that as well, actually. Sometimes when people are starting to buy houses, they're just reaching out to listing agents of houses they're interested in. And I'm not biased here because I have usually just as many listings as I do have buyers, so I benefit from this. But I think, and I will straight up tell someone that I meet from realtor.ca, I will give them the same advice, whether it's choosing me or choosing another agent that you jive with more. You're better off, in my opinion, to pick an agent and work with them from the start instead of just reaching out off realtor.ca. The reason being, all the stuff we talked about today, if I've got a listing and we're listed at $699, we're probably worth somewhere about $800,000, and you call me on the day before we're looking at offers and say, hey, we love this house, we want to buy it. It's very, very rare that buyer is going to be properly equipped to put in a truly competitive offer. Those are the offers that are almost always going to be $50,000 to $100,000 shy of the best offer. And it's because you don't have that trust yet. So when you come and look at my listing and I show you the comparables and say, yeah, I know it's 700, here's the comparables, it's probably going to sell for 800. They're not believing me the same way that a client that has worked with me and we've already offered on 6 houses and didn't get them. So now you trust me that, okay, we do need to offer this much, or, so pick an agent, work with them. It's going to allow that agent to do a lot better too, because they're going to learn what you like and don't like. They're going to help. They're going to be able to identify houses. Everyone, you'd think that here's a house, it's a nice house, everyone's going to like it. It's shocking. I learned this lesson very early on. I took some people to see a cottage, and we went and looked at about 6 or 7 that day. And the one we walked into had the worst secondhand smoke I've ever smelled. It was unbearable. I didn't even want to be in there. And I'm like, sorry guys, I don't want to waste your time here. And they're like, oh, we don't care. I used to smoke. We don't mind the smell.
Yeah.
So it's that's just one example of how my taste in a house is not going to be your taste and is not going to be your taste, Dave. So you work with a realtor and you really learn that stuff. And then all of a sudden I can say, hey, I just showed this to someone else, or I just met this person selling this house. Here's a house that you're going to love. And it works out better for everybody.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to kind of put a pin in it, but we do have one question that we always ask all of our guests. You want to go ahead with this one, Dave? I think I usually ask it, but I'll give you the chance.
I know. I was leaning back in my seat there. Yeah, the one thing we always ask is, what are you streaming, watching, listening to, reading, whatever, but what content are you consuming right now?
Oh yes, I knew. I've listened to a few podcasts. I wasn't ready for this though.
I never am either, so you're good.
We just started watching Yellowstone.
Oh, I was thinking about that one. How is it?
Partly very good, kind of. What's the show that I love? The Ozarks, kind of Ozark-ish.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the acting's as good. Some of the actors kind of rub me the wrong way, but I think I'm kind of fussy when it comes to that. Overall, it's a really well done show. I am reading, I just started a new book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, I read that a couple months ago.
Yeah?
It's great.
Okay. I'm about 15, 20 pages in right now.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was a classic. To be honest, I got somebody on Instagram was raving about it, so I bought it.
Yeah, it's a really great book. Everybody should read it at some point.
Yeah, good.
What's it called again? One more time for listeners.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning.
It's by a Holocaust survivor.
Oh.
And a psychologist who was in the camps. So he has pretty incredible observations from a pretty horrific time.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about you, Dave? Anything new on the go? Just football now?
Yeah, I feel like it's mostly football, then like Good Morning Football, and then, more football. Yeah, right now, I'm trying to think of what I'm even reading. I'm kind of in between books right now, which is rare for me. Normally I have something on the go. TV-wise, what have I been watching? Finally finished Hard Knocks, which again, I know is more football, but finally caught up from August. So done that. How about you, Dylan?
I'll give a YouTube channel recommendation this week. There's a guy, his name's Johnny Harris. And if you look up, he'll come up right away. He just does a ton of different videos, a lot of them kind of about like geography. A lot of them are just about like the world and how things operate. And some of them are like pretty short, like 10-minute videos. Some of them are kind of longer, 25 minutes. One that I watched that was really interesting. I think I told Dave about this a while ago, and it sounds not interesting at all. The real reason McDonald's ice cream machines are always broken. And he does a deep dive into this. And like, there's like all this reasoning behind like the manufacturers of the machines who do it, who have certain contracts with McDonald's, blah, blah, blah. And it's pretty crazy. And it doesn't sound like something that would be so wild. But I'll give him a shout out because I really like his content. I think he makes really good videos.
That's awesome.
I think there's a federal investigation going on regarding McDonald's ice cream machines right now.
Oh,
yeah, from like I don't know what organization investigates that sort of thing, but like legit, basically conspiracy to.
Maybe it was because of his video that got it on their radar.
I don't know how far down this we want to go because we do not have the lawyers to fight McDonald's. So let's just be mindful of that because I'm not putting that bill.
A defamation suit on our hands. Yeah.
Just to be safe, I'm going to just let everyone know I love a good McDonald's for $20.
Oh, those spicy nuggets that they got now, unreal. There's their endorsement.
There we go.
Now they're not going to know if they should sue us or pay us.
Yeah. Please sponsor us, McDonald's.
I got to give a big shout out to you guys. I've listened to a few of your podcasts. They're great. It's exactly what people need. I've had a great time here tonight with you guys. You guys seem like you're increasingly comfortable with this and having fun with it. And
awesome.
I think it's phenomenal.
Well, we appreciate it. And we really appreciate you coming on tonight, man.
I had a great time. I'm sure, I don't know if people always leave feeling this way. I feel like maybe I've learned a few things, but and there's more I'd love to chat
Absolutely.
about another time.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back. There's only so much we can get into these like approximately 1 hour-ish episodes, but yeah, maybe we can get back and talk about some other stuff another time, maybe into commercial real estate. I don't know if that's something that you really deal with ever, but I don't know. Anything.
It's a big topic. We'll find something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, thanks again to Dustin Forrester for joining us and talking about, well, a lot of different things, but real estate and how to get into it if you're not, and how not to totally fuck it up, I guess. And just general tips for everybody.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. I think the main takeaway is go see a realtor when you're looking for a house. Don't try to do it on your own. If you're trying to buy a house, don't just go to that listing agent who's on the sign.
It doesn't cost you anything if you're the buyer, so you might as well get some professional insight. And also, like, keep in mind, like, things to look for in a realtor as well, because there's an awful lot out there, so you can be picky.
Yeah, and go shop around. Like, find a realtor maybe even before you're ready to buy the house. Just like get one who's in your back pocket, so when you are ready, you've already got them, and they already know what you're into and what you're looking for, they can keep an eye out. So
things move fast these days, so you gotta be ready to go if you're interested. So what's up next week, Dylan?
Next week, we have a guy named Dylan DeQuano. He's going to be coming on to talk about insurance stuff, general personal insurance that everyone needs. He's kind of an idiot.
Fun adult topics.
Yeah, exactly. Fun adult topics. But he's right here talking to you right now. So that's me. We're going to talk about it.
So there you go.
It'll be a different kind of episode.
I didn't know if you were going to do like a character voice the whole time.
Yeah, no, I should though, now that you said that.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you got any questions or anything, send us a message ahead of time, and I'll try to get those going for you. There's only so much I can talk about, but I work in insurance, so I got some background in it, and it's something everyone needs. If you have a car, if you have a home, if you have things that you want to protect, you need insurance. It's a necessary evil.
As always, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We're still working on Apple Podcasts, but I promise we have not given up. And pretty much anywhere other than that you look for your podcast.
Be sure to give us a follow, a like, and give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts, if you liked it. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We'll see you again at the Grown-Ups Table.